Recently, AfriForum published an article and talked about the actual ownership of land in South Africa. Since the land audit of 2017, based on 2015 data, I've repeatedly self-published articles about the true nature of land ownership in South Africa and the lies about white South Africans owning 72% of the land. Over time, the media, with multiple videos I've done breaking down the analysis of where the land is, who owns it, over time, many of the media outlets in South Africa have changed their narrative from the outright lie that 72% of the land is owned by white South Africans to changing it to say that 72% of agricultural land is owned by white South Africans. And while that may be somewhat true, it's more complicated than that. On April 3rd of 2025, I produced a video, not one with rehearsed script, but simply one with the information that I was aware of from having studied this issue for many, many years. Some analysts in South Africa, including a famous black South African, talk about land ownership and also misrepresent this. But my article, published on April 7th of 2018, talks specifically about this. And it's not just an article explaining the problem, it's one offering solutions. Now, you may disagree with those solutions, but if you'd like to read that article, the link is below this video. Take you to LinkedIn and you'll be able to see that article that I published. I'm probably going to update that article sometime in the very near future to reflect an updated study on that, based on that data, but updating the facts with today. But it's going to take a little research to update nearly a decade after I published that article. But my video I did in April last year laid all this out. Not rehearsed, no script, simply related to my audience what was going on. And what follows now is that video with a couple edits to fix a problem that I discovered in the video. It had over 82,000 views last year. Let's see if YouTube really is hiding my content and how many people watch it today. This was not a timely topic when I talked about it last year and got 82,000 views in April. Now it's a timely topic in South Africa. Let's see. This is kind of an experiment. If you've seen the video before, you haven't seen this portion. And I ask you to watch it and leave a comment behind. Thank you very much. Cheers. This is a maize field from last year, folks. Land, an emotive issue. Something people will fight over, people willing to give up their lives over. An emotive issue, something that's of great importance now in South Africa as the ANC has botched the land reform program for 31 years. Here in central Pennsylvania, more and more farmland is being turned over to residential and commercial use. We're seeing farms disappear left and right. Kind of a sad situation. But land is what a lot of people fight over. But the vast majority of human beings own no land whatsoever. Hey folks, welcome back. This is Chris in central Pennsylvania. It's disheartening to see the lies and misrepresentations and outright fantasies that are propagated about land ownership in South Africa. On a break earlier today, I happened to read something from Foreign Counsel by Michelle Galvin, former U.S. ambassador to Botswana, and she got this wrong, talking about the majority of land in South Africa owned by white South Africans. Now, the only data that's available to corroborate how much land white South Africans actually own is the 2017 land audit, which is the last time the government's actually taken action to review land in South African ownership. Now, some people quibble about how they defined whites in that survey. I don't know what their process was. Some people said simply on surnames, which is hard to believe because that's ludicrous, because most colored South Africans actually have Afrikaans-related surnames, so it would be difficult to say whether they're white or colored. But anyway, let's accept the 2017 land audit for the data that it has, and I have accepted it for a long time. But that data is already 7 years old, so bear that in mind. Now, here's the thing about land. We keep hearing from the New York Times, from every media outlet in South Africa, and even the foreign minister of South Africa, the head of DIRCO, Director for International Relations and Cooperation, Ronnie Lamola, simply outright tell fairy tales, or in his case, lie. He claimed that whites owned 80% of the land in South Africa. That's fiction, no matter how you look at it. It all stems from the fact that in 2017, land that was designated as agricultural by the South African government, white South Africans owned 72% of that land. But let's roll back the numbers here. South Africa's total surface area is 114 million hectares. 21% of that is owned by the government of South Africa in 2017. So 21%, making the second largest single by group landowner in the country. If we're using groups such as whites, coloreds, Indians, black South Africans, but as a group, the government of South Africa owned 21% of all the land, the surface area of South Africa. Now, 93 million hectares was in private ownership, either through trust or businesses or individual ownership in 2017. Of the 93 million hectares, 36 million of that was classified as agricultural holdings. Now that includes macadamia nut farms, people growing wheat, dairy farms, but also things in the Karoo that have thousands of hectares that you need just to have sheep to graze because the quality of the soil is so poor and the vegetation is sparse. So 36 million hectares of the 114 million are agricultural. Not all are well watered, just they're designated as agriculture because only 13% of the land is actually arable. It's a far smaller percentage. But 36 million hectares of agricultural land. White South Africans, according to the definition who was white in 2017 by the government, owned 26 million hectares of the agricultural land. So that's where the 72% comes from. But bear in mind, that's 2017. A lot has changed since then. Land has changed hand. The government has bought more hectares of land, willing buyer, willing seller basis. And a lot of people have exited the commercial farming business. The number of commercial farmers who are white in South Africa has declined to somewhere between 28 and 32,000 from a total of 72,000 commercial farmers back in 1994. Quite a drop. So there are fewer and fewer white South Africans on commercial farms around the country. So white commercial farmers own 72% of the agricultural holdings. But that represents just 29% of the surface area of the country, 29%. Now, you take that and you realize that represents just 29% of the privately held land. So just under 1/3 of the land that's in private hands was owned by whites, who make up about 8 to 9% of the population. So overrepresented for sure as far as land ownership, but not the lies that Ronnie Lamola is telling you. And if you look at the total surface area of South Africa, it goes from 29 to 23%. So white South Africans in 2017 owned 23% of the surface area of South Africa. Now, there are other whites who own land, residential, but that doesn't add up to much in the way of things. So this is the lie that's perpetrated to spread racial hatred in South Africa and divide South Africans. Now, the problem here is that politicians in South Africa don't want to deal with facts. Ronnie Lamola, the media, and many others, including the New York Times and publications around the world, consistently lie, either because they're lazy or they're dishonest. It's not difficult to find this information. All you have to do is look at the 2017 land audit, and you can find all the facts. Everything's there. You don't have to believe me, ladies and gentlemen. Check the receipts. Go to the 2017 land audit, which is freely available for download from the government of South Africa. Do a Google search. You can download it, look through it, and find this information. So why is this narrative pushed? Well, it's pushed to retain votes for the ruling party. And of course, the media in South Africa in cahoots with the ruling party. So they push this narrative. Foreign media are lazy or dishonest to push a narrative, a racially tinged narrative. For whatever reason, people hate white South Africans in international media. Don't know why. The majority of white South Africans in South Africa were born after apartheid and have nothing to do with it. They've lived only under the African National Congress in their entire existence. So it's time for people to start telling the truth about land in South Africa. Yes, white South Africans own a disproportionate share. Yes, land was taken from people illegitimately, immorally, but legally during the apartheid era, and even before that, starting with the Native Lands Act of 1913 going forward. But an agreement was reached at the Convention for Democratic South Africa, the CODESA convention that took place in the early 1990s. The agreement was that land claims would only go back to 1910 when the Union of South Africa was formed. Now we're seeing people reneging on that agreement, which is one of the main reasons that apartheid ended, is an agreement was reached on not claiming land before that date, because there was no South Africa before 1910. You had a Zulu kingdom, you had other kingdoms, you had the Boer republics, the Free State and the Transvaal, you had the Cape Colony from Britain and the Natal Colony. So it was an amalgamation of all these things brought together after the Anglo-Boer War, which led to the creation of the Republic of South Africa, which didn't exist before that. So 1910 was a reasonable date to go with. But people claiming land from 1658 and 1787, these are things lost to the sands of time. It's illegitimate. And nobody alive today has any legitimate claim to any of those lands. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But the bottom line with land in South Africa is that it's an emotive issue. And therefore, people benefit by lying and misleading. The truth of the matter is this. White South Africans own more land disproportionately than other ethnic groups in South Africa. But we're only talking about a very small number of people. The total number of white landowners in 2017 in the entire country at that time of, 58 million people was around that time, 58 million South Africans, only 95,000 white South Africans owned any land. There are 4.8 million white South Africans, so almost all white South Africans don't own land. To call whites landowners and say they stole the land is dishonest, disingenuous, and it's simply quite nasty race hustling. It needs to stop. The government has had a policy in place which they failed to use properly. They've acquired 3.9 million hectares land, more than that now. They've not distributed properly. They don't provide extension services, credit, education, training for aspiring farmers. When it comes to land, lots of stories and fairy tales are told all over the world about land dispossession. But the story of humankind is one of possession and dispossession, of colonization and settlement. It's a story of different peoples moving in different places around the world. But land is, of course, an emotive issue, as I said. Here behind me, Springfield coming up in central Pennsylvania as we get ready for the next season here on the East Coast of the United States. The reality here is that the government of South Africa, under the African National Congress, has botched the land question, in my view, intentionally. They're also lying about the land. There were 75,000 legitimate land claims in the period that was authorized from 1995 to 1999. Now, if you want to make a claim, it didn't have to be you that was cheated. It could have been your parents, your grandparents. As long as it was from 1910 forward, whether it was a Native Lands Act or the District 6 removal, whatever the situation was, you could claim it. Most people took a financial settlement. And we could have legitimate discussion about whether that settlement was fair or equitable, and I think that's a legitimate discussion. I think people took less money than they were entitled to, but nonetheless, they accepted the settlement, done and dusted. Now we have people coming back. This is ridiculous. Land that was given to aspiring black South African farmers who failed for a variety of reasons. They sell the land, someone buys it, turns out to be a white farmer. Now people are coming back and saying that land was stolen. No, it was bought in post-apartheid South Africa legitimately from people who couldn't farm it successfully because the government didn't support them. So you decide for yourself. This video will be attacked, but this is an objective video and a fair video, an honest video. It's the truth, not hyperbole. What say you, South African? Cheers.